Welcome to our Square Deals web series where we discuss commercial lending with interesting people. My name is Valerie Dufix. I'm the principal at Diamond Carré Capital Group, the place where you come, learn, and earn, where funding and ideas meet. This month, we've been highlighting mergers and acquisition and what's going on in the market. So I thought it would be a great idea to bring on board one of the most qualified business broker that I know. Today, I'm excited to welcome my good friend, Steve Barnett. He's an experienced business broker and a trusted advisor for businesses that are looking to sell or buy companies. How are you, Steve?
I'm great, Valerie. It's great to see you today. Appreciate you having me on your show, and I'm looking forward to telling you about what I do and the importance of business brokerage. Valerie, I've enjoyed watching all of the different presentations that you've had.
We've been highlighting now for a couple of weeks mergers and acquisition, and I thought it would be wonderful to have you, one of the most qualified business brokers that I know. Steve, I've been asked so many times, when was the good time? When was a good time to sell your business?
So Valerie, the short answer is when your business is at its peak value, which brings up a couple interesting propositions because value is different for everybody. In some cases, people need to exit their business immediately because of an illness. So value to them is to get out as soon as possible. For most of us, though, we are looking to exit our business when we can maximize the dollars back into our pocket. So there are a number of factors that can play into that, but naturally, the number one criteria is historical profitability. A buyer is looking to reduce their risk and maximize the potential for their growth. If they can look back in time and see consistent historical profitability, consistent historical margins, they can then put their own projections in place utilizing the historical information. They can figure out the best way to maximize the return on that investment, and the value is higher to them, and it's also higher to you.
Steve, what a great point you made earlier about value being time and money. Now, a question also that I get asked is, what is my business worth?
Valerie, I'm really glad that you picked up on the fact that a business value is not just a return on investment. There's a lot of factors involved. People sometimes come to me and said, well, I'm going to call my CPA, or my CPA told me my business is worth X. And it is much more than Googling up what is the multiple of sales for a production company, or what multiple of earnings should I use when valuing my manufacturing business? Because we all know there are so many variables in operating a business and that contribute to the business value. Again, the most important factor there is the historical profitability. The degree of risk is huge. If someone is going to be taking on a large risk to buy that business, they're going to want to offer a lower amount. So as a seller, we want to do everything we can to reduce the risk or the perceived risk to the buyer. The involvement of the business owner is a very large contributing factor to the overall value. For example, many of my clients are smaller clients, and they have a handful of employees, and they are actively involved in running that business. So active that it actually detracts from the value. I was on a call the other day with one of my clients and a prospective buyer. My client, uncoached, unfortunately, was asked, what is it that you really do for your business? And she started to enumerate, oh, I get up in the morning early and I check the mail, and then I look at the orders, and then I do this, and then I do this. And when she was done, it was obvious the business could not run without her. For a strategic buyer, the value of that business has gotten significantly lower because they're going to have to replace her in order to keep the business operating as it is. So the involvement of the business owner is extremely important. The sector that the business is operating in is also important. Think back during March and April of 2020, during COVID. If you were in the event space, like some of my clients were, all of a sudden everything was canceled. Their business went from 100 down to 0. They were closed. Restaurants were closed. So on the other hand, there are businesses that excelled during COVID. It's interesting to me, many of my contracting businesses had their best years ever because people were sitting home, staring at their backyard, looking at the roof that needed to be replaced, or the HVAC system, which wasn't operating at efficiency. So my contractor clients had excellent years. So the business sector is extremely important in determining the value of the business in conjunction with the economic environment. COVID was an excellent example of that. Is it better to sell your business when everything is booming? Or if we wait long enough and another recession comes, that everything is going to go down, including business values. So the economic environment is also a huge factor. One important thing to think about is the source of your revenues. I have businesses where the owner can pretty much sit back and clip coupons. I'm thinking of a mailbox store I recently sold. They collect rents, storage lockers, the same thing, membership businesses. If there's anything you can do, maintenance contracts, if there's anything you can do to have a steady stream of recurring revenue that increases the value of the business. So as you can see, there are so many different variables that affect the business worth. It is not just a multiple of earnings or a multiple of sales.
Steve, that is so fascinating. It sounds exactly like what Kirk Morangi shared with us last month. He's a business valuation expert, and he talked about all these moving parts you just mentioned. And I want to thank you again for that. Now, very important, I'm curious about the sales process. What is the sales process a business owner goes through when he wants to sell his business?
That's an excellent question, Valerie. I'm really glad you honed in on the fact that it's not an event, but it is a sales process. And the way to handle this process is to break it down into its pieces. I can tell you right now that the average time to sell a business in the state of California is between 8 and 10 months. That's for a properly priced business and properly prepared business. I can also tell you that according to Forbes, 80% of companies that are listed for sale don't sell. A group that I belong to is the International Business Brokers Association. Their estimate of that number is 90%, that 90% of businesses listed don't sell. So why don't they sell? It's because they haven't properly prepared. They haven't gone through the process in a professional, organized way to properly position yourself so that when that buyer finds us, or when we find that buyer, we're ready to take it through the steps. So there's a number of different phases in the business sales process. It all begins with an understanding of the value of the business, and that's a discussion. Everyone has a different perception of value. Every buyer has a different perception of value. So one of the first things that I do for my clients is prepare a business valuation. And then more importantly, is I walk them through. I get them on a Zoom call or a face-to-face, and I walk them through page by page by page so they can understand where that value comes from, why I came up with that number. And more often than not, they agree on that because it's based on factual information. It's based on information I can then present to a buyer, and a buyer will say, that business isn't worth that. And I'll say, I beg to differ. Let's talk about it. And so we will have a discussion. All the way through the process is a really important concept of managing expectations, the expectations of the seller, and the expectations of the buyer. My job as a broker is to bring those parties together in a reasonable, methodical way so that at the end of the day, people walk away feeling they got a good deal. They didn't take advantage of one party or the other. They walked away with as much money in their pocket and the buyers paid as much as they felt comfortable knowing that they can go forward with that business. So once we get through that valuation phase, it goes into a marketing phase. But before you market the business, you need to prepare the business. You're not going to sell your house and have garbage all over the place and trash in the front lawn and expect to attract the best buyers. So yeah, we're going to do a physical cleanup of the business, but we're going to do a physical cleanup of the books as well. I have a background as a CPA. It allows me to take a look at my clients' business books. I can understand their operations, and I can ask the questions a buyer will ask, and we'll be ready with those answers. If there's anomalies, if there's strange things that happened, if there's explanations for PPP loans that show up in other income that might appear to accentuate profits, we'll identify those, we'll address those, and we'll be open with those to the potential buyers. Once we list the business, when we are ready, when we are prepared with a complete prospectus for that business, we will then find the buyer. We will list the business. It will market it on a number of different business for sale websites. The buyers will then find us. We will qualify the buyers, right? You don't want to just give all your information to anyone out there. At the very least, we have an NDA. They're going to sign an NDA because it's proprietary information. We don't want employees to know. We don't want vendors to know. So we get an NDA. We're going to get some information, some basic background information on the buyer. Who are they? What's their education level? More importantly, how much money they got? Do they have enough for a 10% down payment for the SBA or 15%? Or do they have plenty of cash and they're going to buy it outright, which is very attractive to a seller. So finding and qualifying that buyer is part of this business sales process. Once we engage a buyer and they have all the information in front of them, and then they ask their questions, well, what happened here? We want answers. We want answers at the tips of our fingers. I don't want to have to say, well, I'm not sure. Let me go back and let me talk to my client and see what happened. We will be prepared so that we can talk with them one-on-one and explain to them the idiosyncrasies of the business or why this went up or why margins went down. And we'll get them comfortable enough in the information presented that they are comfortable making an offer based on that information. This is an important concept. When an offer is presented to a business, it is based on the information that we have provided up to that point. If we are showing them 3 years worth of profit and loss with a certain percentage of revenue, a certain percentage of margin and operating profit, in their mind, they can rely on that information, project it forward for themselves, and then come up with their own value that they are willing to spend on that business. So based on that information, they will make an offer. Then it goes into a very important period of due diligence. This is where mistakes can get made. If the information on which they based an offer turns out to be false or incorrect or wasn't presented properly, the deal falls apart. Or worse than that, the buyer will come back and say, well, boy, this wasn't disclosed. I didn't realize this, and therefore my offer is now going to be this much lower. So again, proper preparation on those, making sure those numbers are complete and accurate on which they base their offer is very, very important. And then it enters into a negotiation phase. The numbers are there, the numbers are good. The buyer is going to maybe try to find, especially larger buyers, especially strategic buyers that have analysts that are looking to find ways to reduce this price. They'll try to find things and dumb the business down so they can reduce their offer. So if we do our job right, we're going to leave very little room for that type of activity.
Oh my gosh, Steve, it sounds like the seller is in this beehive. See, with everything that you shared with us, all these moving parts, it makes absolute sense to use a business broker. It's like when you're going skydiving the first time, you always have an instructor with you.
It's funny you ask that, Valerie. It's a very interesting question because I differentiate myself primarily because I act as a dual agent. I work for my client, the seller, and I work for my client, the buyer. And most people are incredulous. How can you possibly represent both fairly? And the answer is that it's really quite simple. It all comes down to total clarity, total transparency. When I prepare a valuation, I get my client, the seller, to agree on that value. Once we're done there, I just need to convince my client, the buyer, that's a proper value. Who better to do that than the person doing the valuation? So now I've got both clients where I can help manage the business transaction process from beginning to end. There are so many steps and so many potential pitfalls. I can carry the transaction from step to step to step and manage the process. I use a tool to help me manage the process. Every week, I will get on a phone call or a Zoom call with my clients, and I have basically an Excel checklist. It can go from 1 to 100, all the steps that we need to do. Who's responsible? What is the time frame that we want to finish that one step? At the top of my form, I've got a number of dates. Number one, when is the expected close date? From there, we can back up and say, okay, from there, we need to have financing then done by here. How long is it going to take for financing? 60, 75 days normally for an SBA loan. So then we put that date in there. We back it up and back it up. We can also start from the beginning. Once parties agree on their process on terms, we can then move forward. We need escrow to open in 3 days. We need disclosure statements done within 5 days. It's a working, living worksheet that I take my client, my buyer, and my client, the seller, through, and we all talk, and it's all open, and we add things, and we take things off, and we'll adjust dates where we need to. And by the time it's time to close that transaction, we're all on the same page. Everything is on the table. Everything has been covered, and people feel comfortable, and they're not scared, and they're not concerned that they're going to be left holding the bag at the end of the day, because we will work through every issue we could think of through the process. Using a professional to help you work through the process will not only help ensure a successful sale, but will allow you to continue to run your business in a profitable manner.
Folks, you may wonder why we're doing so much talking about buying and selling your business. In our theme in mergers and acquisition, we've had so far 2 experts. Kirk Morangi was last month a business valuation expert, and we just talked to Steve Barnett, a business broker. They both gave us great insight into the whole process, the moving parts about selling and buying businesses. Most business owners that come to us usually never sold a business before. They don't have a private person they can talk to confidentially to evaluate or to bounce ideas back and forth in the process of selling their business. So I thought that was very interesting to bring those 2 experts and give us a nice overview of what they're doing. Folks, I want to thank you again for your time today, and see you next month for another great episode on our Square Deals webinars.